We now have everything in separate JavaScript files, separate modules. This makes it easier to manage the code. Different people are able to work on different parts. But we need to be able to bring these different parts together in order to use them together. So the functions that we have made public, how do we make use of those functions in another file? That is what we're going to look at in this topic. So we will first look at linking a few of the files, and we'll do that part together. And then for the exercise, I'm going to have you complete main.js. Then we'll review it and finish up in the next topic. So let's get to it. Now, the first thing I want to do before we talk about linking the files together is I want to make sure that we are bringing them all in, that we're linking to all of them inside of index.html. As you can see right now, we have a script tag for main.js, and that is all. Now, when we're putting them in index.html and we've separated them into different JavaScript files, we have to worry about dependency, meaning the order we place this in is important. One file, for example, main.js, may be dependent on another file. If it is, we need to make sure we load that one before we load main.js. So this is one of the difficulties of the traditional module pattern. And we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about how that has been dealt with later. So the first file we're going to load is the utilities. The utilities don't rely on anything else. If you remember, if we look at that, basically they're just providing the utilities to others. And so that's the first one we want to load. So I'll do script source and we'll do js/utilities, tjs utilities. So we've got that one loaded. The next one is video player. Video player relies on utilities, but it doesn't rely on any of these other two. So that would be the logical next one to load. There we've got that one. Now the only one we have left is random video. Now if we look at main.js, it calls this utility and it calls randomized video. Randomized video is in random video. So we should load that one before main.js. So that should be third. There we go. We now have our JavaScript files loaded. We'll go ahead and save that. Now, let's look at how we would connect these together. How would we link them? When we have modules making certain things public, how do we take advantage of those public methods in other files? That's what we want to look at now. Now, as mentioned, ATJS, the utilities, it's not really needing to take advantage of anything else. It just has some utility functions that are then made public. So we're not going to need to import anything into this module to use it. However, video player, random video, and main all need some things imported. So let's look at the process of importing. I'm going to work on videoplayer.js. Now, the process of importing is very similar to what we've done here. Notice we have a variable up here where we imported, we passed in either video player, a global variable that had something on it, or an empty object. We passed those in, placed it in here, and then we made that a part of whatever we made public down here. Now this is how we're going to tie things together, is using that technique. Now, first step, since we divided these into modules as a refactoring exercise, meaning code was already done, we've come back in and we've changed it and put it into modules, we should make sure that we've got everything we need. We have all of these from the DOM that we're able to access to. As we look down through these functions, we should see if there's any calls to functions that we don't have. And there's one there. We need that utility function, format minutes and seconds. I'm looking for anything else. And I'm not seeing anything else that we need to worry about. So this is the main one we have to deal with in Video Player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the name of that function. And I'm going to come up here and make that a variable. Now, why am I going to do that? Well, because I don't want to change any of my code that's inside of this module. And so since format minutes and seconds is a function I'm already calling, well, I will simply make it a variable here and pass into that variable a reference to the function that needs to be invoked. So I've placed the variable here. Now we come down to these parentheses, and we're going to pass something else in. So I put a comma, because we now have two variables up here. Put a comma, and let's go ahead and grab that. So ATJS is on the global space, so we can access that. Now, if we were to just pass in ATJS utilities, basically it would pass in this entire object, or it would reference this entire object. And that's an important thing to remember. With objects in JavaScript, they are referenced in variables. So it would reference this. Well, if we want to pass in a specific function, we can simply point to that by doing dot format minutes and seconds. Now that function, that method, will be referenced in this local variable. Then when we invoke it down here, it will invoke the one that exists in ATJS utilities right here. All right, so that's how we're going to link that method from ATJS utilities to Video Player. And we'll go ahead and save that. And that's really all we need to do with Video Player. So we're done with Video Player. We can now move on to random video. So let's take a look at that. Now, first step, once again, is to check and see if we have everything we need. Now, video stop, we're going to need that. We don't have access to that. Get last part of URL, we need that. Get random int, we need that utility function. And notice we have a reference to video and we have a reference to controller. We don't have those in this particular module. And then down here at the end we have video play pause that we'll need to account for. So what should we do about video and controller? These are really DOM elements. So in my mind, it doesn't make sense to have those grabbed in another JavaScript file and then imported into this one. What we should do is simply grab them inside of here, inside of this module. So we could do that very easily by simply coming to the variable declarations that we have in Video Player, and we're going to bring some of those back here into random video. So I'll paste that in. We obviously don't need these ones here. All we need is video and controller. Now we have a reference to those DOM elements that we're working with on the HTML page. And those will work for this and this. So that's taken care of. Now these other functions are a different story. We need to be able to import those so that we can use them. So let's deal with video stop and video play pause first. And then I'm going to do the other two in a slightly different manner just to show you another approach to this. So I'm going to copy video stop and I'm going to make that the variable here in the parentheses so that I don't have to change anything in this code down here. I can use it like it is. And then I'll do a second one, and that's going to be video play pause. So there we have those two variables that are going to accept a reference to the functions that we want to call. All right, now all we need to do is pass those in. So we come down here, comma, we're going to pass in another item into this immediately invoked function, into our module, and it comes from Video Player. It's a global variable we have access to, dot video stop. That's the function we want to reference in this variable here. And then we need video play pause, so we'll do this again. Video player dot video play pause. And there we go. We have those two passed in. Now, we have a couple of utility functions we need to deal with. Get last part of URL and get random int. Now, there's a different way we can deal with this. We don't have to do it the way I've been doing it, these last two things, where we pass in separately each function and then we're referencing them with a variable. We could pass in the entire object, the entire public object that's made available with ATJS utilities. This entire thing here. We can pass that in by referring to the global variable. And we could place the whole thing into a variable here. So now util represents that entire object that's been made public. So that requires us, since we didn't separate out the methods, that requires then refer to util dot when we call get last part of URL, and util dot get random int. So can you see how we did that? By reference, we passed in the entire public object. It's inside of this. So this part here is inside of that. So now we just use our dot syntax to reference those functions that we want to invoke. All right, so that's all we need to do with randomvideo.js. We'll save that. Now, the last one we need to deal with is main.js. And I'm going to leave that one for you. But let me mention a couple of things about it as you jump into this. So first, a couple of things to consider. What do we need in here that we don't have? Well, the randomized video function is something we need to be able to call. But notice also video list. We do not have that in here. That is actually declared here, and we have not made it public. And so we missed something that we needed to make public inside of random video. So that will need to be made public if we want to use that inside of main.js. Now, obviously, we could have put this inside of random video, this part here, and just dealt with 3 files. But I wanted to show something we run into with this video list is a little bit tricky. So what I'd like you to do is work on main.js. Add the 2 functions, make sure we have access to them using the techniques we have shown, and then give the video list some thought. How would you do that? Obviously, you're going to want to make it public over here in random video, but then how do you deal with putting the videos in it? It's a little bit trickier. It's not like a function. In some ways it is, but in other ways it's not. For example, we declare a local variable here, and that can throw us off inside of this part of the module if we're not careful. Okay? Now, another approach you may consider is perhaps video list should be declared and reside in main.js and then made public to random video. We will talk about that when we deal with this exercise in the next topic. So make sure the function's available. Give the video list some thought. If you're not able to solve that one, don't worry about it. We're going to go over it together in the next topic. All right, take some time to do that and then move on.